Let's take a little time to talk about time and bandwidth devourers. This is an important pit stop in this conversation about managing time because no matter how good you are at managing time, even if you're implementing all of the tools and techniques I am teaching you in this course, there are certain things that are still going to eat up your days, eat up your team's days, and importantly, eat up the bandwidth that you and your team members have available. And so, right now, I want to jump in and give a little foray into time and bandwidth devourers. What are they? Well, first of all, your method of communication, the way your team and you communicate with each other and with the outside world, is going to take up a lot of your time and a lot of your bandwidth. So, what are things you can do better? First, let's understand that not all communications are equal. Email is not the same thing as chat. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But let's pin that to the top of our list. And let's ask ourselves the following questions. How does your team communicate with the outside? Phone calls, meetings, emails? How does that happen? And then, very importantly, how does your team communicate amongst itself? Do you all send flurries of email to each other throughout the day? Is your inbox made of, 50% outside emails, 50% emails from inside your team? Do you have email strings that take up 20, 25, 30 emails because every time somebody responds, you get a new email? How much time do your team members spend going through emails? How much of their bandwidth do they use up going through or worrying about the emails that they have to go through? Does your inbox allow threading and organization of communications, either by matter, by topic? Does your method of communication create more or less work? And does your method of communication allow for real-time communications? And now we're jumping into the key difference between chat and email. What is chatting? Chatting is a real-time communication. It should take place outside of the inbox, and it should be organized by case, team, or project. It is even better if this chatting function coexists with an editing function. And you have that in Google Docs or Microsoft Word, where the online version allows teams to make comments inside a document to each other and have ongoing conversations. When I talk about chatting, I am talking about things like Teams, Google Chat, Slack. Why does that make a difference? Because it immediately changes the tenor and the rhythm of those conversations, and it immediately lessens the burden on your inbox. The burden on your inbox is not just a burden of time going through each of the strings, but also of bandwidth, because your brain needs to keep track of multiple conversations that are happening at the same time and that are being interspersed with each other. If you go on a Slack or a Google chat or a Teams conversation, those are organized by subject matter. And it is perfectly fine to have people go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth because those are conversations. If that same conversation or more of those conversations are happening in your inbox, we could be talking about 30, 40, 50, 100 emails a day. That is overwhelming. That is exhausting, and that makes people feel like they're being pulled in a million directions or that they have insurmountable amount of information to go through in the form of emails. So I cannot recommend this enough. Switching to chat functions for intra-team conversations is a game changer. And I misspoke there. I used the word meetings, but let's talk about meetings. Here are some cardinal rules to hold a meeting. You need to have an agenda. People need to know what they're going to talk about, what topics are going to be covered. This helps the conversation from becoming a long, meandering discussion that overall actually exhausts people and misuses their time. It should definitely have a set start time, but importantly, it needs to have a set end time. If you think a meeting should take about an hour, at the hour mark, you call it. And if the conversation is not over, well, first, it means that too much stuff was put on that agenda for that meeting, or one person or a couple of people were allowed to monopolize the conversation, which brings me to the next point. Don't let anyone monopolize the conversation. In meetings, everybody should be using their time effectively. This is not the time to basically have folks get up there and give long monologues that give no particular input or insight to the rest of the team. Importantly, a meeting should always end with action items. People should leave with action items. Either they should have contributed to action items or they should be leaving with action items. If this is not happening, you should reconsider the purpose and of the meeting and whether that purpose was achieved and whether that meeting was actually useful. And lastly, but very importantly, have someone summarize the meeting. And the beauty of it is that nowadays you can actually have external software record, transcribe, and then summarize the meeting for you. And so this is really important. This way, there is a written record of what was said, how it was said, and it allows people to go back and understand, oh yeah, this is what we thought we were doing. This is what we were thinking. So really have someone summarize the meetings. And just a bit of a gender equity note here, please don't just pick the woman in the room to summarize the meeting or take notes, because that has been a very well documented phenomenon, and we are not about to keep that going. So have it maybe be on a rotation, have people take turns, or use an electronic means of recording, transcribing, and summarizing. And that way you don't even have to worry about it. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about timing of communications. And this is a really important one. And as lawyers, we are terrible. And me even talking about it is really counterculture. There is this fallacy of 24/7 availability, right? First, with the advent of Blackberries, and now obviously with our cell phones, we are always available. But should we be? No, of course not. You should implement something akin to business hours. People are expected to be available and responsive and work during certain hours. Outside of those hours, people are not available. That's it, period. You should also temper expectations of responsiveness. One challenge is that maybe you're working late, especially if you're the owner of the firm. This is your baby. You're going to be working. But it should be clear that as a supervisor, as a manager, as a person in a supervisory position, you should be sure to express to people. And in fact, some people put it on the bottom of their emails and say, this email does not expect you to respond outside business hours. Make it clear to folks that they are not expected to respond just because you wrote outside business hours. Which brings me to the speed of the response. Even if you write to somebody at 10 a.m., 2 p.m. in the middle of business hours, it doesn't mean that they need to respond to you immediately. Which actually leads back to the first conversation we were having about what type of communication you are engaging in. Because emails have this tendency of being ping pong, and people have this sense that they have to be immediately responsive, but they have to go through all of their emails in order to maintain responsiveness. It creates a level of stress. And importantly, what does this do? It makes them feel out of control. Always having to respond, always having to be at the immediate behest of somebody who sends you an email any time of day means that you are not in control of your own life, of your own time, of your own attention, of your own energy. So be sure that you understand and temper that when you send a message, the response will not be immediate, and that's okay. And then finally, when you give people time off or when people take their time off, it's really time off. It was completely a change of pace, such a welcome change of pace. I worked once in one place and I did not receive a single email when I was off. That was amazing. And I really endeavor to do that for people who have worked for or with me. I really try to not send them emails at all when they're off. And if they really have to be on a communications because they need situational awareness when they get back, I make it clear to them before they leave, do not check your email. Remove it from your phone. You are not to check your email while you're off. If you get emails from me, you can ignore them 100% because it's just so that they're in your inbox when you get back. And I wanted to share this little anecdote with you. On the screen, you will see this notation. Juji will try to get days off for 25th, 26th, and 27th. These are Christmas and the 2 days after in 2013. And I look at that and I remind myself of why I give these talks, why I wrote the book, why I give classes. It is unfathomable. At the time, I had a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And I literally put on my calendar, Juji will try to get days off on Christmas and the 2 days after. And guess what? I didn't. Don't do that to yourselves and don't do that to the people around you. We will be a better profession for it.